So, Min, I want to just start off with maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the dental industry.
So it's funny, actually. My dad was a dental technician. So when I was 17 years old, just graduated high school, it was summertime. I didn't really know what I was going to do. So my dad said, "Hey, you know what? Instead of taking up space on the couch, let's go into the lab. I'm going to show you how to do some stuff, make yourself useful." And funny enough, I was there for about 2 weeks. I was just sitting there watching him wax up little things with his little Bunsen burner. And one of the guys wanted to take a vacation, so he was in the model department. So they said, "Hey, you're here. Would you like to go into the model department and learn for a couple of days so you can cover this guy when he's on vacation?" So that was great. I learned how to pour models 16 years ago, and my skill level in that department hasn't improved one bit since. But funny enough, after that 2 weeks, one of the other metal workers happened to quit his job, and he said, "I'm moving to a different lab." So there was an opening in the metal department, and my dad said, "You know what, I can put your name in there." And the owner said, "Yeah, we're happy to have you on." So I started waxing up copings, investing them, casting them. Did that for about 3 months, and the owners of the lab there, they had invested into a CAD CAM system, the Zahn system, and this was about 2006 November. And they said, "Hey, you're good with computers, right?" And I said, "Sure." So they made me the guy that was going to run the CAD CAM system there. Meanwhile, I'd probably scanned 2 abutments on the Procera, and that's about it. That was my whole experience. But here we are 16 years later. And that's what I've been doing. So yeah, that's kind of how I got my start in the lab industry.
That's excellent. And, I did say that you were founder of Dental Tech Tips.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Dental Tech Tips, one of my big passions, of course, is cameras and video equipment, things like that. We'll speak about that a little bit more later. But what I used to go to trade shows back when I was a little bit younger, I'd probably say about 10 years ago. And you'd go there and you'd see, all these really well-renowned speakers, key opinion leaders, and they'd be speaking about all these great products and telling you about all the benefits, and you're like, okay, wow. So you order these products, you bring them back in the lab, and when you get it there, it's not necessarily quite as good as what they had claimed, right? And it just never really sat right with me, because these industry mouthpieces, unfortunately, they were just willing to say whatever for the highest bidder. And so Dental Tech Tips, I founded that as an organization, as a way to really be a voice for the dental lab industry, to be an unbiased source of information, and just provide a platform that people can really go to and really trust based off of my own personal experience. And of course, the big thing, the founding principle of that was for making videos, making really cool videos, little short videos, where I could just review little things. And that's really Dental Tech Tips in kind of a nutshell.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mentioned before that, you were living in Canada, and now you've made the move into the United States in beautiful sunny California, and you joined a laboratory. Do you want to give us an insight, a look into the lab that you have joined?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here in the office right now with Mr. John Wilson, is sitting over here designing some absolutely complex cases. John, wave, say hello there.
Hey, John.
Oh, yeah, there.
Hey guys.
What are you doing?
Yeah, so that just a little cameo there, but yeah, John has been an inspiration in my career since basically 2006. I think we had like the Xenotech Wheelan forum or something like that, and I remember just seeing this guy on there who just had this wealth of knowledge. So he's just been an inspiration my whole career. We've been friends for a few years, and he had posted something up a few months ago, actually about half a year ago now, and I'm so glad I went with my instinct to respond to that opening, and we kind of decided, you know what, I think this is a good fit. And John does some extraordinary stuff here with full arch implant cases, complex restorations with some of the best clinicians in the world, really. So it was just an opportunity of a lifetime to really take my career to the next level, and learn a couple things, but also help John with some of the skills that I think I bring to the table. So it's just fantastic. And sunny California is a wonderful side benefit as well. So I can't complain at all. Yeah,
absolutely. I've seen many lectures from you, and basically they're really diving deep into digital technology. And I really consider you an expert by just listening to you. And I've learned so much from you just from little snippets that I've watched here and there. is that basically your passion within the dental laboratory field? Is dental technology it for you, and why?
So you know what, I've my entire career I've been a digital technician. I probably have a year's worth of practical bench experience if you
Mhm.
combine all my time that I've spent on the bench. The majority of my career, I've used a mouse and a keyboard, and I've designed on 3Shape, and I've used a wide variety of digital technology, 3D printing, milling, scanning, all of that. So I think I've kind of been shoehorned into that a little bit, but at the same time,
Mhm.
I've really embraced digital. I'm
Mhm.
a huge proponent of doing things as much digitally as you possibly can, just because
Mhm.
that's kind of what my skill set is, right? I always say that I'm very good digitally, and I'm kind of an average technician with my actual hands. So digital allows me to really take what's in my mind's eye and put that out there in real life. So that's my skill set. That's what I'm really good at. But you know, maybe not everybody else is. But I'm a huge proponent of everyone trying to go as digital as possible, because it offers a whole bunch of different benefits that you may not be able to do traditionally, right? You're able to play, you're able to undo things,
Mhm.
you're able to make mistakes and not have to destroy your work or waste more time, right? So there's the time savings, there's the efficiency, there's the predictability. And I just think digital as a whole is really where our industry is headed, and where it's been actually. But I think it's just a great way to augment our capabilities.
Do you find that, a lot of times with technicians that are basically more on the analog side, going digital is like a pain point for them because it's just like the fear of the unknown, like you're saying, like you can make mistakes, you could correct them. Is that something that you find with talking to people, like going digital is like a scary thing for them versus like, oh, it's exciting and I should try to do this?
Yeah, and I always say it's because technology is weird and scary, right? And anything new that it's outside of your comfort zone. We're creatures of comfort, and it's really hard to push yourself, especially when you do something so well with your hands, right?
Mhm.
To really tie one arm behind your back and try something new. It's very intimidating. It's very challenging, but I always kind of preface things by saying, try look at your first denture setup, right? My first denture setup, I was there probably for 6 hours. I had wax everywhere in my hair, on the bench, on the floor,
Yeah.
and the setup was mediocre at best. And I think I had to rip it apart and put it back together again, and that was another day wasted, right? But eventually, you work at it, one foot in front of the other, one mouse click better than the day before, and you'll get there eventually, right? So it's just practice really does make perfect, and that's what I always try to get people to understand when they're trying to go digital, right? Because it's a process to learn. You're not going to be great at it the first time.
Right. It's just practice and practice and practice until you finally feel comfortable and get it right. Right.
Absolutely.
Um, what is your digital design software go to? Like,
So
is that basically what you enjoy using?
so 3Shape has been my software of choice since November of 2006. So we at that point, I was probably the second technician in all of Canada to be using 3Shape at that point. And it's again, it's kind of going back to that previous question. It's something that I've gotten very comfortable with, right? So
Mhm.
if so, there are arguably some softwares that do things better than 3Shape in certain ways, and I'm
Mhm.
guilty of it, of not necessarily using those softwares because I'm comfortable with 3Shape, right? So
Right.
but you know what, 3Shape, the reason that I like it so much is because it's very intuitive in the way that you use those tools, right? And
Mhm.
it allows you to do things in such a way that you get from point A to point B, your endpoint, in a very efficient manner. Whereas a lot
Mhm.
of other softwares I've used quite a few over the years, where it may be a couple more clicks and maybe a couple more things. You might have to jump through a few more hoops to get the day-to-day stuff. Where 3Shape, I find, kind of falls apart a little bit is once we get into those kind of edge use cases, where a lot of the stuff we're doing here actually at Sunrise, where we're working with these complex cases where we're trying to correlate a whole bunch of data. That's where it kind of falls apart, because we're trying to do things with the software that it was never intended to do.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I mean, 3Shape, I'm a huge fan of the company. We run a group with a bunch of moderators, very near and dear friends of mine. It's probably about 36,000 members in that group on Facebook.
Mhm.
They're the 3Shape study group. Love to
Yeah.
plug them because it's just a wonderful place online where we all congregate. share, showcase things, and really just help each other out. So 3Shape as a software is fantastic, but 3Shape as a community is even better.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good to join those groups because you do learn a lot, and you may have questions and you can get them answered just like that, over social media and things of that nature. So social media is good in a lot of ways, right?
It's fantastic, yeah.
When someone is like insecure, maybe they don't really understand the software in the beginning, or they need some more time, or they have extra work, and it's just overwhelming. How do you feel about outsourcing designs?
So you know what, there's this negative connotation with the word outsourcing. And I don't think, if you're sending to, the lowest bidder, then yeah, that's not the best way to approach business, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that do that, and it's a viable business model. But really looking at the trends that we have today, right, especially with, supply chain sort of shortages, labor shortages, outsourcing is a fantastic way to really augment and recruit talent that you're not able to do. Actually, one of my lectures I spoke recently about the difference between local production, right? So typically in the lab for the past, 40, 50, 60 years that labs have been around, everything was done in-house, right? You try to in-house as much as you possibly could. You had your casting department, you had your removable department, everything was done and in control of the lab. But the problem with that is with technology, the way that things are now, with the complex treatments that we need to address, especially with an aging population and, aging population base, to recruit the type of talent you need to be able to do the work that you want to do, we really need to start looking at decentralized forms of manufacturing, right? So maybe you're an excellent ceramist, but you don't know how to use digital at all. Right. There's nothing wrong with contracting out to a fantastic designer. And then, of course, if you don't have the machinery, there's nothing wrong with contracting out to a company that's excellent at milling, right? And using them as partners and really decentralizing your production to really augment your capabilities and really highlight what you're able to do. So I think we're going to be experiencing over the next little while a lot of decentralization. The other part of outsourcing, especially like for milling partners, printing partners, things like that, one of my things that I always say is, if you're looking at what your outsourcing bill is, right, and ultimately your goal is to bring it in-house for control, look at how much you're spending in a month outsourcing. If you do a little bit at a time, and eventually your bill is large enough that it justifies getting a machine, that's a great way to really get your foot into the door with digital, right? And kind of piecemeal little pieces and bring those things in-house that you do want to control, but keep things outside that you don't.
And how do you feel about outsourcing designs?
Outsourcing designs, again, I think, what, I like to think of myself as a pretty good designer, but there's fantastic designers all over the world, right? So why not use that capability? Why not leverage their skills to help you make better work? So I think outsourcing is definitely a viable thing, as long as you develop and you establish those relationships with your designers, and you vet, whether it's a company or you're working directly with a remote designer, vetting them, making sure that your process and you're getting a product out that looks really good, right? According to whatever your business model may be.
Right. Absolutely. What about, I know digital landscape, it's changing daily. How do you see it going in the next year or 3 years, let's say?
So digitally, I mean, for a long time, milling reductive technologies has been really kind of the mature segment of dental lab technology, right? So everything that we produce nowadays, probably 80-90% of it, that's for final definitive restorations, is done in a milled fashion, right? Because the materials are robust, the machining is very precise, and we get good results. It's been proven. But I think over the next, decade or so, or, maybe 2 decades, we're really going to see the revolution of additive technologies. And the benefit of additive, that's 3D printing, but not just 3D printing. You have metal printing, you have zirconia printing, all these different additive technologies. And the benefit there is you're no longer limited by machining limitations, right? So when you're milling things, you always have to account for that CNC tool and the tool path and colliding with things. If you have undercuts, the human body is not straight lines, right? There's lots of undercuts and dips and grooves and different things. So you're limited by the tools, how small and how big they are, and where they're able to get into. With additive, you can print any type of shape, really. The downfall at this moment right now with additive is the materials are very limited. They're not quite as resilient. But I think in the next few years, with more advancements, I'm very, I'm very hopeful that we'll get a lot better materials. And I think we'll see a lot more stuff being done additively.
How do you see AI playing a role in laboratory technology over time?
So artificial intelligence, I think, is going to play a pretty huge role, again, because I spoke about it a little bit before, but we have a huge labor shortage, right? You have so many technicians, especially in the removals department, in the removal side. A lot of people are just leaving the industry, either through retirement, either they're finding a different industry completely, and there's not many people entering the industry. There's not many education programs anymore for technicians. So I think artificial intelligence, digital technology as a whole, that's really a way to again augment the capabilities that we have. So if you look at the statistics, I think people in my age demographic of 34 and under as dental technicians, we make up less than 3% of the entire labor force in the US. So you just have to imagine the 50 and over is probably, I think, 60% or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's something like that. So artificial intelligence technologies that help speed things up where it's non-critical, where you don't need that subjective human touch, I think it's definitely going to benefit us in many ways.
I mean, how do you see, all of us, in the dental laboratory space, inspiring maybe people to go into our field? Like, what do you think the best way, to inspire somebody to want to become a dental technician or a designer?
Well, you know what? I think education, number one. We really have to improve the education. A lot of the programs right now, they try to base it off of the National Board for Certification, CDT. The problem with that is those exams are based off of crown and bridge, ceramics, dentures, removables, orthodontics, right? And the processes that they're teaching in the schools and the examination processes are all skills and techniques that are fundamental, but they're fundamental 30 years ago, right? So you get out of school, or you learn, or you're studying for exams, but those skills don't directly translate to what you do on a day-to-day basis. The other part of it is nobody really knows what a dental technician does, right? Like that we're just, we're inside a dungeon, or in the shadows, or in the back office, and that there's not much awareness of the career. So I think social media has done a really good job of showing what dental technicians are able to do, but really, advocating for the positions and recruiting kind of in the schools and in the education system a little bit earlier, so they understand that this is an excellent career. Honestly, if you have the skill set, the aptitude, and you like, bench work, or, digital or lab technician things, then I definitely think there's a lot of people that would benefit from a career. I mean, I love this industry. I grew up in it. It's really given me all the opportunities. So I think there's a lot of people that can benefit from getting into dental technology.
Oh, absolutely. I think it is a career to be celebrated. I say that over and over again on a look in the lab. As a practicing hygienist still, I really didn't understand what the laboratory technician did. And now I have a totally different appreciation and knowledge base of how important your role is in the patient's life. I mean, it's your work, your expertise that these patients are walking away. Yes, you do need your dental team. Of course, you need your doctor, of course. But at the end of the day, it's, the dental technician really taking all of those findings that the doctor has given them and creating what the patient needs to survive, basically, eat, smile, interact with people, forming words. I mean, teeth are just so important, whether they be natural or whether they be fabricated, by a technician. So honestly, I have a newfound appreciation, and I just want to celebrate, all of you every chance that I get, because another thing, the patients don't even realize, they think the doctor, does all of this. I mean, first time I walked into a laboratory, I was just amazed by what I saw. And the more that I learned and the more that, my appreciation grew and grew. So that's how I feel anyway. So, but I think, as time goes on, I think the career will just begin to get better and better, I think, for people. So thank you. And thank you to all the technicians that are out there.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Now I'm just going to switch gears to 3D printing, because that's something that everybody's talking about. Every company is coming out with new resins, new printers. How do you feel about 3D printing, and where do you think that's going to be taking us in the next few years?
So 3D printing, I mean, is the new exciting, it's the new kid on the block, right? You go to the trade shows and you'll see everybody's selling a 3D printer. Everybody, like you said, is coming up with brand new resins, because that's the growth opportunity.
Yeah.
I think 3D printing is really going to be where, the majority of our products will be made in the next few years. Well, in the next decade or so. And again, that comes down to the materials being more resilient, and the technology getting a little bit better, the accuracy getting a little bit better, tolerance is getting better, and just more people getting into 3D printing. Even though it seems like everybody's getting into 3D printing, when you look at the statistics, a lot of laboratories still have not made that commitment. They haven't jumped in with both feet yet.
Mhm.
And it's kind of intimidating, because they don't understand the technology, or they don't have the education, or it's just again, fear of that unknown. But the nice thing about 3D printing is it's very accessible, especially nowadays, because you can get into it at a much lower price point than you would for, per se, milling. So
Right.
3D printing is, around the $10,000-$15,000 range. You can get into a 3D printer, as long as you take the training from your reseller, and you get a little bit educated. It's pretty easy to get up and running. It's basically press a button and start, and off you go. As long as you follow the proper protocols and post curing, and making sure that you're keeping things within the manufacturer's recommended specs, you'll be fine.
Now, are you more thinking about I just want to rephrase that. Let's say I want to get into 3D printing. How would you say that I should get started? Would it be the printer that you would think that I would have to look into first, or would you say the materials? Because a lot of people have conflicting ideas of how to get into it.
Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of looking into open systems, right? So you'll look at 3D printers, and if you look at 2D printing, right? So printing with inkjet or lasers, what a lot of printing companies do is they sell you the printer, they'll give you the printer for free, in hopes that they'll get back that money from the ink sales. So 3D printing companies did that initially as well, right? Where they sell the printer, not necessarily at a loss, but maybe at cost, in hopes that you get into their platform, they lock you into their resins, right? But what we've noticed in recent years is a lot more companies are embracing this open resin philosophy, where pretty much any printer that falls within a certain range, wavelength, either 385 or 405, is able to print resins from any company. There's still a couple of holdouts, a couple of companies that are, playing hardball, and they really want to sell you the printer, control that whole process, and sell you the resins that are locked into their systems. And the reason they do that, of course, is they want that competitive advantage. They want to sell you the printer, but they also want that exclusivity and that control over that resin, and making sure they're putting out a good product. And I'm a huge proponent of making sure that when you print, you're following the IFUs from the manufacturers, because these are medical devices. They're going into people's bodies. We want to make sure that we're making sure whatever we're producing is safe for people to use. So just because it's an open system, it doesn't mean that it makes it inherently unsafe, right? A lot of what these companies are doing is they're validating these resins, and you want to make sure that you're working with these resins on validated printers. So you'll see a lot of people, what they're doing is they're buying hobby printers, and there's nothing wrong with hobby printers, because they're still spitting out 385 nanometers or 405 nanometers. The problem there is the process itself is not validated, right? So is everything they're producing safe, right, in the eyes of the FDA? So making sure that you're using a validated printer is very important, and for compliance, keeping yourself protected legally, but also, making sure patient safety is, at the top of your list. So yeah, patient safety, validation, making sure that you're using those open resins on printers that are validated. The other thing I'll say is making sure that you look at the technology behind the printer, right? So there's all this different stuff. There's SLA technology, MSLA, all these different abbreviations and numbers and different things. So the one thing I always tell people is, like, for example, if you're looking at real estate, right? What's one metric that you're able to use when looking at real estate? That's price per square foot. So if you're looking at one house or another house, you could say, okay, well, in this neighborhood, it's $13 a square foot or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
So when you're looking at printers, what you want to look at is the actual build platform itself, whatever the area that is, and then the price of that printer per square millimeter of build platform. And that gives you a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison, not necessarily of entirely what the printer is able to do, but you're able to gauge the value of what you're getting out of that printer when you're looking at that price per square millimeter. So that's a great way, but you also have to look at the technology behind it, how fast these printers print, how accurate they print. Everything matters, everything counts, right? I do a couple of different webinars. I mean, the shameless plug for myself, they can look me up online on YouTube, Dental Tech Tips, and there's a couple of different webinars I've done for the ROI of 3D printing, the technology behind 3D printing. They can reach out to me, just send me a DM on all the different platforms. I'm happy to send out links as well. But yeah, there's a lot of education out there, a lot of different ways you can, even hopping on groups, right? So again, I'm a huge proponent of Facebook groups for research. So if you go on 3D printing groups specifically for certain manufacturers, maybe you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 printers that you're interested in, or just 3D printing groups in general, they'll have a lot of experts on there who've tested these printers. And ultimately, as consumers of these products, we decide what's best, and ultimately what is best trickles to the top, right? So there's a couple of different printers that I think are great for everybody, a very good fit. Asiga, I think, is one of them. Sprint Ray is a very good one as well. Accurate is a very good printer. But they're for different reasons, right? For different reasons, and for different purposes, and for different price points and different markets. So yeah, just really do your research in as many ways as you possibly can.
As far as bottom line, I mean, you mentioned value. How do you feel that 3D printing can really affect a laboratory's bottom line if it's done effectively? And
so the biggest thing that we typically print, most people print, is still crown and bridge models or some form of model.
yeah,
And that really is a loss item, right? Because a model is not something you make money off of. A model is something that we're producing to either appease our ceramists or metal workers or people who are used to working with models. And ultimately that product goes in the trash, right? So if you really want to affect your bottom line when you're 3D printing, you really need to start moving away from products that go into the trash and moving into direct print applications. So direct print applications are things like 3D printed splints, 3D printed surgical guides, 3D printed indirect bonding trays, temporaries, crowns, dentures, things like that. And the reason is because these are no longer things that are costing you money, you're throwing them in the garbage. These are the things you can actually print and then sell to dental offices as a product. So that's when your printer is making you money rather than, costing you money.
and what would you say would be the easiest thing? Let's say someone is just into printing models right now, because I hear a lot about that.
Yep.
What would you say would be the easiest to design and then get out to their dental partner?
3D printed splints. I mean, besides the whole occlusion factor and all that stuff, there's
Yeah.
a whole different thing there. But if you're just doing like a regular bite splint that you're maybe already doing in a thermoplastic material traditionally, take
Right.
2 or 3 of those cases, right? Just get 1 bottle of resin from the manufacturer if you have a printer already, and just do a few splints. So 3Shape, if you have 3Shape already, they provide Splint Studio as a free license option. So it's not going to cost you any more there if you already have 3Shape. If you
Right.
don't, there's a bunch of different companies. I think D3 Splint is one of them. There's a couple other different companies that produce software that's able to produce free splints for you. There's also 3D printing companies that will design the splint for you for a cost, very, very minimal, and then you're able to just print it, right? So printed splints are a very easy way. That's kind of like a very easy direct print application that you can really try out and start making money with your printer in an easy way. The next thing I'd probably say is, 3D printed temporaries, right? Milling temporaries or making temporaries by hand, it's time consuming. It ties up your mill. If you 3D print these temporaries there. It's an excellent way of freeing up some of your manufacturing capability, but also producing an acceptable product that's not a definitive restoration, but it's an easy way to dip your toes in the water.
Absolutely. You mentioned time. How does 3D printing free up someone's time?
So 3D printing is very good at what we call mass customization, right? So it's very good at doing individual different parts in a very large scale. Whereas most manufacturing is done in like either printing or like injection molding, things like that. They're same parts that are being produced thousands and thousands of times, right? So those types of technologies, those types of manufacturing processes are good for, like if you're printing or you're injecting phone cases or different things like that, products that are very similar. With dentistry, no two products are ever the same.
No.
So 3D printing is an excellent way of doing mass customized devices, things like Invisalign, right? So Invisalign is one of the largest mass customized producers in the world. So when you're working with a whole bunch of different parts that you can 3D print, when you're milling and you're doing things with your CNC machine, you're basically limited by that spindle. Right. And the only way to augment your capability there is to get more spindles or get more milling machines. So if you need more production capability, you need to have more milling machines. Whereas with 3D printing, if you're using DLP technology, rather than drawing out or producing one object at a time, it's projecting multiple layers of that print at the same time. So if you have a large enough build platform, you're able to produce 8-10 models at a time in a period of 30 minutes. So whether you're producing one model in 30 minutes or 8 models in 30 minutes, that's where 3D printing really has that scalability and that benefit for time savings.
So that's a huge advantage for the lab. Huge advantage. I was going to ask you, what do you feel the biggest advantage? And that's really the time management and being able to print more than one restoration at a time. So that's fantastic. What do you feel the biggest advantage is with milling? Because we spent a lot of time on 3D printing. What about with milling?
Well, you know what? The materials are so robust. I mean, we do probably 90% of everything in zirconia nowadays in the industry, as a conservative estimate. And the material is just very easy to machine. The tolerances are fantastic. I mean, you can get a cheap machine and it's still going to give you sub 10 micron accuracy. So the materials are very robust. You're going to get a great result that fits very well, and it's great for definitive restorations. Milling, of course, also gives you access to, if you're milling metal, if you have a very robust machine, then you can mill titanium, you can mill cobalt chrome, and you can mill a whole variety of different materials that allow, to give you a whole bunch of different treatment modalities.
Getting back to 3D printing again, I want to know about what are the challenges that you feel that exist with 3D printing when you're just getting started?
So, I mean, you're going to make mistakes, right? You're going to press print and the print's going to fail. You're going to go back there and there's just going to be nothing on the build platform at all. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what I was speaking about earlier. You're going to have challenges. It's just one foot in front of the other. Some of the big challenges I find is a lot of people are not following the proper protocols because everything really matters, right? You want to make sure that your post-curing and post-processing washing protocols are adhering to what the manufacturer is saying. You want to make sure that you're using the proper type of solvent, right? So if most of the stuff is designed to be washed with 99% isopropyl alcohol, right? So if you're using 91%, that's not going to give you as good of a clean. It's going to have residual resin, residual monomers, oligomers, and all those fun chemicals all over that. If you're using a 70%, that's going to be even worse. So 99% isopropyl alcohol on most resins. A lot of these newer permanent crown resins don't play nice with isopropyl alcohol, or they need to be washed much, much less, because what happens is you'll actually find that in as little as under 2 minutes, the alcohol and these solvents are ripping polymer chains apart on these things. So you'll get like an opaque or like kind of like a almost like a calcification look on top of some of your prints. So you really want to adhere to what the manufacturers validated in terms of washing, but also in terms of post cure, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately you're only getting about 20% of your cure inside the print. And then the remaining 80% of that post cure is done inside your post curing unit. So you want a high quality post curing unit that's validated for that specific resin. And you want to make sure that you're post curing for the recommended amount of time. So not over curing as well, because what you'll see is when you look at the material performance charts on some of these things, you'll see that the material resilience really goes up and up and up and up. When you reach that critical point where it's reached that optimal cure, when you go over that point, it drops off dramatically. So not over curing either, just to keep yourself protected, but making sure that you're following those optimal parameters. The other thing is really taking into account what your environment is, right? So if your 3D printer is located in Canada, and this is a kind of a sidebar Canadian dental tech tip here, and something we experience. So if you're located in Canada or a northern climate and you're 3D printing and your printer's near a window or your heater shuts off at night and it's January and you have minus 30-degree weather, you're probably going to have some variation in your prints, right? So either the machines are really cold. These are metal contracts and expands and restricts. So one of my Canadian dental tech tips for 3D printing is get a space heater and actually park it in front of your 3D printer and point it at it, and have a little digital thermometer next to your printer, because a lot of these print resins work really well at 30 degrees Celsius. So if you can get that ambient temperature around your printer to be around 30 degrees Celsius, that's going to give you an optimal print result, right? Whereas, in sunny California, John over here has his Pro 4K parked over there. He hasn't calibrated it once since I set it up for him. And, it's been fantastic because the weather is very stable here. So you have to really take into account, what the humidity is, how much light there is. If you have it near a window and there's sun beaming down, that could really adversely affect your resin, right? Because these are photosensitive polymers. So they react to light. So everything counts. So just make sure that you really take into account all the different variables of your specific print environment.
I tell you, man, that's the first time I've heard of that. So, and there are many areas of the United States that get very, very cold as well. So that's a really good tip, and very humid at the same time. So absolutely, thank you for that.
Happy to share.
What are some emerging trends that you're finding will be coming to fruition?
So, I mean, the biggest thing right now, I think the hottest topic is digital dentures. I was recently at a conference, and I'd probably say 90% of the lectures were about digital dentures. Most of the materials that you see now are kind of geared towards digital dentures. A lot of the innovations in software are for digital dentures. And the big thing is, of course, if you look at the majority of dentures that are being fabricated today, I mean, there's companies that produce millions of dentures a year, and they're all being done by guys at the bench with a Bunsen burner and a wax knife, and still be producing these dentures by hand. Yeah. And like I was speaking a little bit about that demographic, most of these guys are within retirement age in the next 5 to 10 years. So if you think of millions of dentures just in the United States alone, I'd probably say less than 50,000 dentures are being produced digitally. So you have to imagine the percentage that needs to be done digitally or need to be converted to digital. So digital dentures is going to be huge. 3D printing is going to help augment that. I don't think the materials are there quite yet. There's some very good materials for sure. Lucitone is a very good material. I have a lot of friends who produce a lot of dentures with Lucitone that they've had great success with it. But the problem with a lot of these materials is that they're still monochromatic, or they're not quite aesthetic as a carded tooth or as a multi-layer PMMA that you mill out. Even a multi-layer PMMA that you mill out isn't quite as good. You have to play a little bit with it more. They have different libraries that really kind of try to accentuate that to overcome the aesthetic limitations, right? So digital dentures, I think once the materials get a little bit more better, more aesthetic, more resilient, we're going to see a lot more printed dentures, which again, with mass customization is going to be much better because you can print 10 dentures at once in a single job rather than milling one denture that takes 3 hours, right? So that's going to be one very big trend. The other thing that they're really kind of focusing on is permanent crown resins, for either, you know, full arch treatments, so something like a Sprint Ray Onyx, or, you know, Flexera Smile.
Right.
Trusana as well is an excellent material. We tested Trusana, is very promising, and I think it's a great material. Kind of smelly though, but all the resins kind of smell kind of funny. But yeah, all these permanent crown resins for, you know, either all on X treatments or single crown restorations. Yeah, they're kind of another segment that companies are really going to be focusing on, because you know what, there's going to be so much demand in the coming years, and the way to kind of fill that demand is with print resins.
Right. And you know what, with the aging population as well, I feel like implant dentistry and all on X kind of implant retained prosthesis is something that I think doctors are really focusing and you know, prescribing for their patients now. So how do you feel about that whole movement? Because that's something else that's really hot that everybody's talking about.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be a move to chairside. I mean, as a technician, I hope not, right? But I mean, there's going to be a market for that, right? So I really do see a lot of those simple single units, or little smaller, less complex things going chairside. I mean, it just makes sense. It would be kind of ignorant for us to ignore that and say it's not going to happen. The movement to chairside, having chairside printers, having those materials, having and allowing doctors to prescribe those things, it's going to happen. Where I think the lab can help there is, you know, either you pivot your business model to help support that in some way, either, you know, offering the design service, or doing a more definitive restoration, or kind of being complementary to that, right? Us over here, we're kind of focusing more on like the high end stuff, you know, more complex treatments, and doing that. So that's just really differentiating yourself and moving away from, you know, simple things that are more commoditized and
Mhm.
easily replaced, right? Unfortunately.
Now, how would you advise integrating a fully digital workflow, a new, let's say, fully digital workflow
Yep.
into a laboratory?
Into a
Like, what
lab.
would the first steps be?
So I'm a huge proponent of smile design, and smile
Mhm.
design is super easy to do, because it really lets you get off on the right foot, and to really start, and get you as a lab technician involved very early in the process. Um, and like you were saying, most people don't know what technicians do, or, you know, we're involved much later on in the process. With smile design, with fully digital workflows, what happens is, technicians get involved a lot much earlier in the process, right? So we're able to look at these simple pictures that they take, right? So you take a picture of the patient smiling like this, and then one with them fully retracted. You bring this into a software like 3Shape Smile Design, overlay these two things, and you're able to see what looks good potentially, and kind of arbitrarily based off of the clinical assessment and some of the chief concerns that the patients brought up to the clinician. And you're able to kind of, you know, not dictate the treatment, but give them some options in terms of what you think is possible based off of this initial thing. And
Mhm.
then kind of following along with that, and moving from each subsequent step, you're able to take that smile design, bring it into a digital diagnostic, right? And that digital diagnostic subsequently can be used for your prep, or it can be used for your provisionalization, and ultimately you can use that for your final definitive restorations. So that's how you
Mhm.
kind of lay out the foundation and the groundwork to get a fully digital workflow going. And there's different different indications, right? So with dentures, same thing. You still do smile design, and for each subsequent step, keeping that initial plan that you had in mind. You're going to change things as things go on, because you're going to uncover something, or something's going to pivot mid treatment. But at least you have that kind of end goal in the back of your mind, and you're able to use that.
I know you're passionate about photography. I've
Yes.
seen that doing a little bit of research on you, and I just love that. Can you tell me how you got started with that, and what inspires you, and how do you bring that into your career as a dental technician?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to my dental tech tips founding story there. So the other component of the founding of dental tech tips, of course, was me taking my camera. So back then, I think it was like 2015, it was Black Friday, and I bought myself a Canon T5 on Black Friday. And it was this little camera. And of course, as a dental technician, what do? I spend most of my day inside a dental lab. So what did I have? Things to take pictures and videos of? Dental lab things. So I started recording little short videos, review videos, taking pictures of dental lab products, posting them up on YouTube or whatever channels that I could find. And you catch the attention of manufacturers, and they go, hey, you know what, we really like what you did there, what you were saying, your video style looked really cool. Can we send you some products to try? And you can just, let us know what you think. And that's great because they're sending you free stuff. Who doesn't love getting free stuff, right? That's
Right.
just
Like
so.
little presents in the mail.
Yeah, exactly. Little presents in the mail. Every day is Christmas when you get some new products. So I got these products in, and I think eventually one of these companies approached me and they said, hey, you know what, let's do a sponsored little product thing that we can do. So we do this little sponsored product, and I think it was like maybe $200-300. But ultimately the camera, the T5 that I had, you couldn't plug a microphone into it. It was very limited in its video capabilities. So I said, you know what, if I sell my T5 and I take this money that I made from this little sponsored project and I put it all together, I could buy the T5i, which was like the next model up, right? So Dental Tech Tips has really been a way to fund my seriously unhealthy addiction to camera gear and camera products. But really, I really enjoy it because you make very nice stylistic videos, and it really plays to my technician brain with editing videos and then using the computer and then putting that all together. But the other component of it, of course, is using a camera. You're also able to use it as a tool in digital. So digital shade communication, you're able to use it as a marketing tool, right? So taking photos and making really nice photos that you can present online on your social media, or even for print, and you're sending out to offices to hopefully try and drum up work. So like camera gear and making videos, all this stuff, it's a fun hobby for me, but also it's been an essential tool in my toolbox for dental technology.
And as far as like, have you gone out there and taught your clinical team like the proper way to take certain pictures in order to get a good outcome, for the final restoration, as far as like patients, shape of face and smile and retraction and like all of that as well?
Yeah, so education is very, very important. So especially with digital shade communication, there's a bunch of different systems on the market. So there's like Matisse and Elab Prime and all these different systems that use what they call a cross-polarized lens. So it has this little black filter in front of the lens, and then it has these polarizing filters in front of the flashes. I'm really kind of simplifying this, but what that allows you to do, along with like a gray reference card, and you're able to calibrate these photos inside of software. So back in the day, what we typically do is if you have a single central, which is one of the absolute most panic-inducing restorations that any lab can do, because a single central is almost impossible to match. So you'd have to have the patient either come here or you'd have to go to the office, and you're trying to match the shade. You're doing 3, 4, 5 bakes. You're sweating. You got other work, but you've wasted an entire afternoon trying to do the single shade match. With Elab or Matisse or all these other cross-polarized methods of shade communication, the onus then kind of falls on the office to purchase some of this equipment and learn the photo protocol. So as long as the office is taking the same photograph in the same manner, right? So as long as they eliminate all their ambient light, they're relying on the flash, they follow the camera settings that you tell them to, and they take that picture. And then at the lab, what we're able to do then is we're able to copy those same exact flash settings, light settings, camera settings, and we take the same picture at the bench. So what does that do? You're able to bring it into software. You're able to calibrate both images, and you can do a virtual try-in. So you see this very often when you'll see a cutout tooth pasted into the patient's mouth. But because the lighting conditions and the camera conditions were identical from the office to the lab, you no longer have to have that patient come to the lab for a shade match. So that makes things very powerful, because now you're not limited to, if you're a very, very excellent ceramist, you're no longer limited to your local area and seeing patients, right? Or, if it's the afternoon and you need to do a shade adjust, you're not tying up 3-4 hours of your most productive time in the day trying to do a shade match. You can do these things later on at your own time and at your own convenience. So it's a very powerful way of again, augmenting your capabilities.
Absolutely. And I am sure that this is something that a lot of people will find very, very interesting and want to learn more. And I'm so pleased and happy to let everybody know that you'll be joining us at Chicago Lab Day this year in our glass classroom, speaking on this topic.
Yep.
So stay tuned to dates, times, and all of that. And all of us at Zahn are so happy that you are going to be joining us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'm super happy that I get to, go show up and play with cameras and, have fun for an hour with everyone.
Oh,
So I'm
that
always
was
looking forward to
great.
that.
So, Min, do you have any last comments for our attendees?
I mean, you know what? A lot of people have gone digital already. I mean, if you haven't at this point, it's not too late. It's not too late ever. But really, really do as much digitally as you possibly can. But I always segue to, if it's more efficient to do something in a traditional manner, do it that way as well, right? So at the end of the day, we're still in business. We still want to produce things efficiently. If you want to do as much digitally as possible to augment your capabilities, but if your capability and your ability to do things is with your hands, lean in on that. Lean in on what you're really good at. I've made a career out of really leaning into the tools that I'm very good at, and that's been a huge benefit for me. But again, we all have different skill sets as well. So
Absolutely.